Thank you, Meg. So welcome everyone, as I said, to the 12th Annual Council of Governors and Members meeting of South Warwickshire NHS Foundation Trust. We have two parts of this meeting: the formal part of the meeting, which covers off the minutes, the annual report, the quality report and summary accounts, and then the annual report of the Council of Governors. And after the end of the formal bit of the meeting, we have a video on our response to COVID-19 and our annual Going the Extra Mile Awards, as well as inviting members of the public to ask us any question they would like. If you want to ask a question during the course of the meeting, there is the chat function on MS Teams, and that's a very helpful way of allowing you to ask questions, and we'll try to answer them as we go along. But before we get going with the formal part of the meeting, I just wanted to recognise what a difficult year this has been for families and patients of those we serve, our citizens, as well as our staff, in all aspects, given the COVID pandemic. This has been the most emotional, most exhausting year I think any of us can remember for the NHS. And on behalf of the board, I just want to recognise the extraordinary effort and endeavours of everyone who works for the Trust, but also the enormous cost that's been paid emotionally and physically by members of staff in trying to do their best and our best to serve the citizens that we do in South Warwickshire. So, in terms of the formal aspect of the meeting, we have some apologies for absence. Meg, could you please tell us who's formally recorded apologies?
Yes, we've got apologies from Governors Jean Arrowsmith, Helena Darcy-Cope, Roger Lloyd and Alan Bode. And then we've got apologies from board members Sophie Gilks, Kim Lee, and then non-execs David Spraggett, Simon Page and Bruce Paxton.
Thank you, Meg. So moving on then to the minutes of the last meeting, the 11th annual members meeting of the South Warwickshire, which happened on the 10th of September last year. Just before we come to that, could I ask all colleagues to ensure their videos are off? Mike, your video has come on. Thank you. So the last set of minutes, are you happy to accept the last set of minutes? If there are any amendments, could you please raise a digital hand? Okay, Rosemary, was that you raising a digital hand, or has it disappeared? Okay, I believe it's disappeared, so I don't think that was raising the digital hand, even though I saw something. So on that basis, I will sign the minutes having accepted them being formally approved. So thank you for that. So we therefore move on to the annual report, the quality report, the summary accounts and the auditor's statement for 2021. And so Glenn, over to you, please.
Thank you, Russell. I'm going to share my screen, and if you could confirm you could see it, that would be great.
Yes,
lovely. Thank you. So, yeah, I'm going to take you through a few slides which go through the report that the whole of which is on our website. I've been in this organisation 15 years actually this week, which has flown by, but it's a long time. It's certainly a long time for an NHS chief exec, and been in the NHS 38 years, but I suppose nothing could prepare me in all those 38 years for the year that we've just gone through. And as Russell has already said, it's affected all of us and all of our staff. But the response from the organisation was incredible. And what you see on this slide is some artwork that we've placed just outside the chapel at Warwick, but we've got copies of this in other sites across the Trust, which captures some of the spirit of the response and some of the sentiment from the public around COVID. And if you get up close to this particular piece of artwork, you can see words and cards from individual members of the public and from some staff and from some children that really help to capture the spirit. So I encourage people to have a look at that. What I'll be going through in a moment is some of the headlines from the summary document of our annual report, which is on our website. The full annual report is also on our website. I'm not going to particularly go through the quality section of that because, as the chairman has already said, we have a video later which actually captures much of the quality of what's happened over the last year with our response to COVID. But I'm going to talk through the main elements of that report. So firstly, just a huge thank you for all of the people that have helped and supported us over the last year. This slide captures just some of those, but the 11,000 hours of contribution from volunteers is hugely significant. And we've seen lots of new people stepping up to volunteer to help us over the last year. And many of those will want to continue to do so over the coming years, which is also great to see. Some of our stalwart volunteers are on there, including the Warwickshire 4x4 volunteers group, but also some other new people that have joined us over the last year and helped us. Great collaboration with Sir Peter Rigby and his SCC group. It wasn't just a matter of them giving us iPads to allow access for patients. It was a time when you actually couldn't get iPads, but we knew that his SCC group would, and they stepped in immediately and provided those within moments, actually, to make sure that we could provide virtual visiting for our patients. The Army joined us as well, and it was a great moment for me where they actually stood to attention when I entered the room. I'm not used to that in my job, but they came alongside us and did all sorts of support jobs to help us to function. And we also launched an appeal. We also tapped into the national Captain Sir Tom Moore appeal and have been able to provide support for staff as a consequence, which I'll touch on a little bit later. But lots of innovation over the last year. And on this page of the summary report, we capture the components of that. So there's a lot of IT innovation, things like doing meetings like today virtually, but also some huge flexibility from our staff. So we refer here to complementing our ITU capacity by asking some other groups of staff, including theatre staff, to work in our critical care. And we tripled the capacity of our critical care service, and we needed to at the height of COVID. But lots of other examples of other members of our workforce doing different roles and stepping in and helping and changing things in response. And you'll hear some of that on the video. And then also innovation in the way that we delivered services. So outreaching services to ensure that we could manage more patients in their own home, to manage them more safely, to keep them out of COVID environments. And so there's an example there of respiratory outreach service that was established in the organisation, but also some of the work that we did outside of the trust. And then there's just huge examples of lots of other things that we've done, and I won't go through all of these. We've moved in many cases to offering virtual clinics to provide support for patients. Sometimes there's a telephone, sometimes there's a video. It's not exclusively virtual because there's still lots of patients who need to be in the room with our clinical staff. But that's allowed us to offer more access to maintain effective services. And things like the home oximetry service that we developed enabled us to monitor people at home. And those innovations are there for the future because whilst we moved rapidly to respond to COVID, keeping people at home is very much part of our strategy. So if we can do that safely, then the innovation that we've seen will help us to do that into the future. We've developed something in Stratford called the Digital Hub, which in collaboration with industry partners is allowing us to test some state-of-the-art solutions to achieve that, as we call it, left shift of keeping people out of hospital safely where we can. And then there's examples here of Post for Patients, which again was our volunteers helping us to communicate with patients when they were not able to have relatives present in the hospital. And when you, many of you may have seen the Channel 4 program that took place, and we'll be showing some of the some footage from that later. But the work that our staff did to be the proxy relative, where their relatives couldn't visit, and to hold the hands of patients, sometimes the hands of dying patients, has really touched all of us across the organisation. You'll see a bit more of that later. But despite all of the pressures of COVID, there were still lots of things that were happening across the organisation, which we pay tribute to here also. So we never stand still. We're a sometimes understated organisation, and it's not our style to blow our own trumpet on a lot of things, but it's the annual general meeting, so we can do a little bit of that here. We are relentless in our pursuit of excellence as an organisation, and so even though we are the only acute service provider in the Midlands that has an outstanding rating, one of only a few in the country, even though we've got some of the best results in the NHS, we always seek the opportunities to do things better and improve our services. So what you see here are some examples of that. I'd probably draw out the collaboration with West Midlands Ambulance Service as probably one of the most significant ones. You will have followed in the news the pressures that our ambulance services have been under, and they have particularly found it difficult to release ambulances from sites, and the turnaround time, the handover time of ambulances is a real concern in the NHS at the moment. I was delighted at the height of COVID to receive a letter from West Midlands Ambulance Service Director telling us that we were the best performing in the country, and they really appreciated the fact that we took their concerns seriously, offloaded their patients, managed their patients, and then got them on the road for the next patient so that they could operate safely and we could operate safely. And that collaboration continues with work with paramedics. We work really closely with our GP colleagues, and there's one or two projects that we'll be talking about in the course of this year. But the way that they have helped us to respond to COVID has shown how this system is one of the best healthcare systems in the whole NHS. And then we talk here about technology to support stroke and cardiac patients, and then also a responsibility around sustainability. So as an anchor institution, we employ a lot of people locally. We burn a lot of carbon historically as an NHS, and we're absolutely committed to ensure that we reduce our carbon footprint. We operate sustainably. So we had a strategy that was relaunched during last year. There's some more action on that. We're very much committed to the NHS long-term plan ambition to be net zero on carbon. And indeed, we're learning on some of the best examples of this across the group. So I'll refer to the group arrangement a little bit later. Also great to see the recognition for our maternity service over the last year. So Her Royal Highness, the Princess Royal, was provided a virtual event, and you can see a snapshot of that on that picture, which was great recognition for our staff. We've been at the forefront of some of the changes to maternity provision nationally and helped to shape that, and we still continue to get excellent feedback. So the Maternity Service of the Year award from the Royal College of Midwives was a real accolade to that team. We also developed some new services this year. So the Paediatric Assessment Unit, there's a picture of that being swung onto site during this year. That's allowed us to increase our ambulatory capacity to support our young people in South Warwickshire. And through that new model of service delivery, we're admitting fewer individuals to hospital, we're treating them on the same day basis and getting them home. And we've been able to respond to what has been quite a dramatic increase in demand for paediatric services, and one that we'll be keeping a very close eye on over this winter. Indeed, we reflected on that at our board meeting this week. And then some of the tech that I referred to earlier. So we piloted some work in North Warwickshire with something called Dockerbo, which was to support individuals in care homes. So the place they call home is the care home, and we're outreaching into that with primary care support to again ensure that they don't have to come to hospital unless they absolutely need to. And some of that innovation is absolutely the forefront of what of innovation across the NHS. There's then some future developments that we reflect on here. The Ellen Badger project is a really exciting project. It is about integrating local health services to the population of Shipston and the surrounding villages, to integrate with a GP surgery, but also to develop a more ambulatory model and to look at more health and wellbeing focus, as we have done at Stratford Hospital, which opened their health and wellbeing centre a few years ago now. Also great to see, and if I look out of my window from my office at Warwick, I can see the multi-storey car park starting to emerge. Now that may be seen as something that obviously isn't mission critical clinical infrastructure, but it's really important for our visitors and our staff that we have the ability to park on site in a hassle-free arrangement, and that will be open with 469 car parking spaces within a few weeks from now. The endoscopy unit, again, another development to enhance our endoscopy unit, and we've just started a project to replace our entire electronic patient record, and we're doing that in collaboration with our partners at George Eliot, but also with our colleagues at University Hospital Coventry and Warwickshire. But the most important thing that separates our organisation, I think, from many is our incredible workforce. And they've had a really tough time over the last year, and we've had to find all sorts of ways to ensure that we provide support to them. For me personally, obviously because of the restrictions of COVID, we've not been able to physically get out or have people in a room and hold those kind of meetings. So we've used virtual means to keep staff up to date with what's going on. I do regular videos for staff to inform them of the progress of COVID and where we are as an organisation on recovery, and mainly to thank them for their considerable efforts. So what you see on this slide are some examples of how we've spent some of that money that we generated from our local charitable work, but also from the national charity, and how we've reached out to our staff, how we've created networks of support. Some of our networks to support our BAME staff, for example, our disability network, just understanding the huge diversity that is the NHS workforce, which is our biggest asset, and tapping into the skills and experiences of our international workforce is why the NHS is the best healthcare system in the world, and we'll continue to do that locally. And you see here some examples of how we spent that charity money, but also the decision we made before the start of last year to create the Thanks a Million scheme, which was to thank our staff for helping us to get our outstanding rating. Our staff survey is always the most important KPI for me about how we're doing as an organisation. And in the midst of COVID, our staff filled in a survey, as did staff across the NHS, and the results of that came back in February of this year, and once more showed how our workforce and our approach to workforce is the best in the NHS. So we came in top 5 of the NHS on this. The NHS doesn't produce performance indicators on this one, but the Health Service Journal does. So their league table I always look out for, and I say we came 5th in that, alongside some very well-known organisations in the NHS. But actually what you now find when you go across the NHS is that we're one of those very well-known organisations. Chairman and I were on a call with a national team a few weeks ago where they were calling out some of our services as being the best in the NHS. So on that particular occasion, it was our discharge to assess model, which is being adopted elsewhere. So really great to see that. But it's our staff and their engagement and their ideas that absolutely keep us in that top performing position. Lots of, so every year I show this activity chart, and normally I show an increase in absolutely everything. Obviously this year was a very strange year, and we saw different patterns of demand. We obviously were at one point during COVID encouraging people to not come to hospital unless they absolutely needed to. We generally have that mantra, but obviously we did stop some of the services that we were able to stop for a short period. And the reason for that I described earlier. So moving our staff from theatres to support critical care expansion meant that we had to stop doing some of our elective surgery. So unusually you see a reduction in some of our numbers. Births still continue to be pretty high, but pretty much everything else changed shape last year. What this doesn't show you, of course, is the acuity of the patients who did come into hospital, which was extreme. And at the peak of COVID, we had a completely full critical care, but also we're managing patients on CPAP, which is a respiratory support mechanism, that not full ventilation, but that we were able to do at ward level. So we had that at ward level as well, and very high acuity in a situation where we were also struggling for staff, and where we were also trying to ensure that we met the infection prevention guidelines also. So those are our volumes. And during COVID, we saw a suspension of some of the national standards and targets. And I suppose the biggest worry for all of us, and we're seeing this now, is that a number of people didn't come to the NHS during the last 12 months who should have. So particularly if you look at cancer referrals, there's significant fall off in those, and we're now seeing those come back. And of course, that delay will mean for many of those patients that they come back to us with higher acuity, with more complex cancer, which may be harder to treat. So we're right in the midst of dealing with the recovery of COVID at the moment. I reflected at our board meeting this week on the challenges of this winter, where we will obviously have ongoing COVID. We expect to have a quite severe flu because it's been suppressed over the last year, and other respiratory illness. But also the normal demands of winter, alongside needing to maintain our recovery of elective, our recovery of cancer, and to maintain our workforce morale. So this will be a challenging winter, but I always feel very confident about our abilities in organisation to respond to whatever challenge comes our way. And I think the last 12 months have reinforced that we can handle anything as an NHS if we stick together, play to our strengths, and work hard. Claire, your video is on, and if you wouldn't mind switching your video off, that would help. Thank you. Okay, I'll keep going. So on the next slide, I turn to our overall financial performance. So within the detail of our annual report, there's our annual financial statements and our quality statements. What I draw out from this mainly is the fact that we spent £362 million as an organisation. We've grown quite a lot over the last few years, and obviously during the last year, some additional costs associated with managing COVID. So £14.6 million top-up funding to manage COVID. But we managed to operate without getting into deficit. Again, I point to this deliberately because most NHS providers were in deficit last year, but our ability to deliver a 435,000 surplus on a turnover of 362 million, that's a 0.12% tolerance. So we spent every penny last year, but we didn't get into deficit. So we managed public resources really effectively, which we take great pride in. We take great pride in that as an organisation because we do it through productivity and efficiency and doing the right thing and getting it right first time. And you see on that slide some analysis of where our income comes from, and also at the bottom there, the fact that we had quite a large capital programme last year, so 26.7 million. Including things like the car parking scheme I referred to earlier, but also a lot of IT and medical equipment, including replacement of the MRI at Warwick, the improvement of the Central England Rehab Unit, and some changes to the way the site was configured to help us to cope with COVID. So lots of really useful investments last year. Also within the annual report, there is the auditor statement. Our external auditors, Deloitte, have given us a clean audit. That our auditors are appointed by our governors. The audit statement is taken to our council of governors as well as our board, and it's there for the public to see in our annual report on our website. So all the performance figures and expenditure that I referred to as all passed those particular tests. Refer to here to our cost improvement programme. So despite a rather strange financial regime over the last year, we've had to continue to manage our resources effectively. So we continue to innovate and look at savings and opportunities as they come forward. And that's included over the last year working with the strength of our group. So we have that group arrangement, which I'll refer to on the very next slide. So our foundation group, so George Eliot Hospital in North Warwickshire, Wye Valley Trust in Herefordshire. One of the things that we've done this year, for example, is bring together our procurement functions. So that combined, what is £750 million spending power across our group is being used to ensure that we could deliver good value to all three organisations. Our group retains the identity of the three trusts within it, and as a consequence of that, we are now seen as a best practice model for the way provider collaboratives, as they're referred to, work. Within that, though, our mantra of sharing best practice at pace has allowed us to, particularly over the last year, use technology to bring our group together a little bit more. So I'll give a couple of examples. So when we were responding to COVID, the respiratory teams were able to connect directly to the respiratory team in Wye Valley. They had some good practice to share with us. We now have a regular grand round meeting, which is all of the consultants across the group sharing best practice and looking at individual case studies using a virtual Teams format in the way that we're doing today. So we've been able to, despite the distances, and it's a long way from the very tip of North Warwickshire down to the very tip of southern Herefordshire, indeed into Powys, where we serve Wales. It's a long way, but actually technology has brought us together. So some great examples of how we've maintained performance improvements in all three organisations. And I'm delighted to report that some of the work that we pioneered here in South Warwickshire has been implemented in all three trusts now, including our approach to flow, which has ensured that all three trusts now have some really good mortality performance, but also quality and safety and patient feedback. My final slide takes me back to the most touching moment for me over the last year, which was when I suggested that I needed some my office brightening up because I was spending rather too much time in it. And the fact that my office sits on the corner of the site, because a lot of staff come in to start their shifts, I asked people to send in some pictures for my windows, and lots of children and families and staff actually sent through rainbow pictures and posters. And there was a point where I couldn't see any light in my office because I put them all on the windows and it was completely dark. But that spirit and that support that you all showed us, so I'm conscious that a lot of public who have supported us will be looking at this AGM today. So thank you for what you did, but also huge thank you for our amazing staff who kept going, who kept innovating, who kept thinking about the patient, who kept us all safe. let's remember them throughout the coming winter also, because that will be challenging too. So that's the end of my slides, Chairman. I'm going to stop sharing. Russell, I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Schoolboy error, apologies. What I was saying was hopefully members of the public will see the enormous activity and progress that's been achieved over the last year. Just a couple of things I would like to add. The first is, as Glenn mentioned, as an organisation, we are focused on the relentless pursuit of excellence. And whilst we have an enormous amount to be proud of, particularly in comparison to other bits of the NHS, we still recognise the need for more progress in certain areas. And one I'd pull out would be the areas of equality, diversity and inclusion, which the Board of Directors have been spending time on to ensure that we really do encourage all colleagues to fulfil their potential, as well as calling out unacceptable examples of racism directed towards our staff. But the second thing I wanted to emphasise is the fantastic performance that Glenn has highlighted would not be possible without Glenn as our leader and the executive directors and all of the management teams and clinicians and nurses and allied health professionals all pulling together to the common cause of looking after our citizens as best we're able. So thank you, Glenn, on behalf of the Board of Directors and the Council of Governors for your leadership and your colleagues' leadership as well. So we therefore note, because it's already been formally approved, the annual report, the quality report and the annual accounts and auditor's statement. So thank you, Glenn. So we will now move on to the annual report of the Council of Governors. Well, as well as being Chairman of the Board of Directors, I'm also Chairman of the Council of Governors. So just to summarise the work of the Council of Governors over the last year, obviously on the 10th of September last year, we had the 11th Annual Governors and Members meeting and formally presented the accounts at that point. And the meeting received not just the proceedings of the governors during the year, but presentations on public health and the Trust's journey that year through COVID-19. And as we will be doing later, the presentation of the annual Going the Extra Mile awards to Trust staff. Since that time, the Council has met formally in public 4 times, on the 10th of September 2020, the 10th of September in an AGM, the 12th of November and the 11th of February 2021. But during the COVID pandemic, we had to cancel a meeting on the 14th of May. All other meetings, including the annual members meeting, has been held virtually, which I think has worked much, much better than many of us expected. It's become part of the rhythm of the way we do things, and for many colleagues, it does allow them to attend when otherwise the practicalities of life may make it more difficult for them. But we have had to adjust meetings to recognise the pressures in the acute pressures we've had during the pandemic, and agendas have been tailored accordingly. At each of the meetings, though, the Council of Governors received reports on the performance of the Trust and on the Trust plans, and were given opportunity to question directors on their reports and to question non-executive directors in particular. Each meeting also received reports and considered recommendation from the Council of Governors subcommittees, including the Nominations and Remuneration Committee, the General Purposes Committee, the Patient Care Committee, and the Business Oversight Committee. In performing its statutory duties during the year, the Council of Governors received and approved the recommendation from the Nominations and Remuneration Committee to reappoint me, the Trust Chairman, until the 1st of May 2024, which is an endpoint for me, which is galloping ever faster. Secondly, they received and approved the recommendations for the Nominations and Remuneration Committee to reappoint 2 non-executive directors as follows. The first was Rosemary Hyde, and the second was Bruce Paxton. They received and approved the appointment of 1 non-executive director and 1 associate non-executive director. They appointed the Trust's external auditors. They reappointed Mary Malloy, the Public Governor for West Stratford and Borders, as the lead governor. And they received a report from the Trust's external auditor on the outcome of their work for 2019-2020. They received the Register of Governors and Governors' Interests. They approved the revised constitution, but did not approve proposed changes to governor tenure. They received and approved the report on the annual appraisals of the non-executive directors and myself, and they received and noted the annual report and accounts for 2019-20. In terms of highlights of the Council of Governors business, I'd summarise those as follows since the last annual report. The Governors contributed to the development of the Trust's strategy and plans at what we call the round table meetings. The Governors have particularly sought assurance from the Trust during the year on all aspects of the Trust's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, winter planning, Brexit at that point, the restoration, recovery and maintenance of services. And the Governors continue to contribute to a variety of internal project meetings and working groups that monitor progress of key projects within the Trust, and that's included the end of life care, the Ellen Badger Hospital development, the car parking development, which Glenn showed us the photograph of earlier, Patient Falls, the Patient Portal Group, and they were also invited to join the Patient Experience Group and the Patient Safety Surveillance Committee. The Patient Care Committee continued to scrutinise the quality of patient care, received regular reports on topics of interest, and received and discussed feedback raised by Governors on behalf of their constituents. The Business Oversight Committee received reports from the Trust's Audit Committee Chair, Rosemary Hyde, and the Non-Executive Director, Financial and Performance Committee Chair, Simon Page, on aspects of the committee's business, and then questioned the chairs to gain sufficient assurance. The General Purposes Council continued to oversee the arrangements for the conduct of business for the Council of Governors and also membership recruitment and engagement. The Governor continued to be a member of the Clinical Governance Committee, which is a subcommittee of the Board of Directors as nominated by the Council of Governors. And finally, Governors continue to have the opportunity to meet virtually with myself and all of the non-executive directors in a series of coffee meetings, as we call them. They were also able to observe the public board meetings. Again, they're being held virtually. And they were also invited to observe the Trust's Audit Committee and the Non-Executive Director Finance and Performance Committee. The Chair continues to meet with the lead Governor, Mary Malloy. In terms of membership development and engagement, during 2021, frankly, we had to adapt our approach and our priorities to the reality of the pandemic and to social distancing. And therefore, frankly, we've been unable to organise any face-to-face events. As a result, we've had to explore different ways of working and keeping in touch with our members via email, sharing important news and information about the pandemic, as well as other developments in the Trust. We've also continued to use the Trust social media platforms to engage with existing and potential members. And I believe actually Glenn has more followers on Twitter than we have members. So if you're not signed up to follow Glenn on Twitter, I thoroughly recommend it. We also use infographics to raise awareness of different conditions in line with national campaigns. In June 2020, we published a special edition of the Members Magazine, giving thanks to everyone for their support that we received during the COVID-19 pandemic. And as Glenn emphasised in his presentation, I would particularly like to thank all of the volunteers that came forward to help with the vaccination campaign, a quite extraordinary demonstration of public support, not just of the NHS, but for their fellow citizens. And volunteering at the Trust gives one a great sense of purpose in terms of helping others. And I really would encourage members of the public to come forward and volunteer. During 2021, the majority of our proactive recruitment initiatives on the membership side were put on hold due to social distancing, but new members can join via the online form, which is available via the website. In terms of elections and appointments, during 2021, there were no resignations received or elections during that year. We did, however, have some appointed governor nominations due to the reorganisation of South Warwickshire Clinical Commissioning Group. Adrian Parsons resigned and Dr. Suki Deshi was appointed to that position. And so we're delighted to have Suki working with us. In terms of general comments from the Council of Governors, we, the Council of Governors, are assured that the Trust has again performed well. Led by our Chair and Chief Executive, we expect this to continue. We are satisfied that despite challenging times, the care provided by the Trust has been of a good standard during the last year. We are also assured that its finances are well managed by a competent management team. We are pleased to have seen a number of significant developments with further support patient care. We see our role as holding the non-executive directors to account, seeking assurance on behalf of our members, and supporting the Trust in ensuring the current position continues and where possible is improved. In the coming year, despite continued increasing pressures and challenges facing the NHS nationally and locally, I can't emphasise enough, as the Chair of the Council of Governors, the enormous thanks we have as a Board of Directors to the work of the Council of Governors, giving up their time. A number of governors make a phenomenal contribution to the work of the Trust. And I'd like to thank in particular Mary Malloy as our lead governor in her work. So that I think summarises the annual report of the Council of Governors. So that will be formally received and noted. Could I just ask everyone to go onto mute, because I think some colleagues aren't on mute. So are there any, we will therefore move on to any other business. Please raise a digital hand from Council of Governor members or board members if you have any other business. Okay, I can't see any digital hands raised. So that represents the close of the formal part of the meeting. So we'll now go on to the response to COVID-19 during 2021. And we produced a fantastic video to bring this alive for us, so to speak. Glenn, do you want to introduce it for me, please?
Yeah, the video you're about to see captures just some of the things that happened over the last year from lots of groups of staff associated with our response to COVID, and also includes some of the footage from the Channel 4 documentary, the new series that featured the Trust as well, which really helped to show how things were. A bit later, we'll celebrate some very specific individuals when we look at the GEM Awards, but I think probably the best thing that I could say at this point is that every single member of our staff has deserved a GEM Award last year. We'll look at some exceptional ones in a moment, but everyone contributed to this, whether they're in hospital or in community services, whether they're frontline clinical services or support services. So hopefully you'll enjoy the video. So Meg, I think you're going to play that.
Michael Coker, can I please ask you to put your mute on, please? You're not muted at the moment. Thank you.
My apologies.
Exactly 1 year ago this week, Warwick Hospital opened its first COVID ward. And then they had to open another and another until there was no more room. Avon Ward was the first to take COVID patients. day after day.
Okay.
But there is a glimmer of hope now, and there are moments to linger at a bedside, to help Joseph Ashmore speak to the family who can't visit.
Who should we ring? Right, you can ring again. Oh, we're connecting.
Hello, Pop.
Hi, Grandad. We'll get you home in a few days.
Yeah.
We're hoping Wednesday.
I'm old.
2 more days stuck with us.
That'll be good, won't it?
We've seen things that we've never seen before. We've seen things that we never thought we'd see as nurses. We've seen people go alone. We've seen people, young people, on so much oxygen needing to go to intensive care. You know, I've been qualified a good few years, but never seen anything like it again.
Nowhere in this hospital has escaped its impact. At its peak in January this year, they had 150 COVID patients.
It's been hard on us all, really hard on us all. We've all had a range of emotions, from feeling at the beginning we were scared to be looking after these patients, and then we learned and we knew what we were doing, and then the toll on my staff with the death rates were just horrific. You know, some of our patients have been with us a while, and they do, and we've got some better. You know, I've had some really lovely moments. I had a lady turn 100, and I went in and we sang happy birthday, and I read the Queen's. She had a card from the Queen, and we sat and read that with her, and we FaceTimed her son, and they were so grateful for that moment, that we were able to give them that moment, and that's really positive, and that stuck with me. You know, that was lovely. That was just so. And then we have other moments that are not so good.
The porters move through the hospital, the link between the wards, the facilitators of an X-ray, a scan, a discharge.
Morning, you okay? Morning, Lynn. Morning. Hi, Kate, you all right? Good morning, Suki. I know we're given instructions, and the instruction would be the patient maybe is suspicion of COVID, or is COVID positive, or COVID contact. So we have to take all of that into account as well. So I always work on the basis that every patient is a COVID patient, and I have COVID myself, so I need to protect myself and the patient as well. Sometimes you see the same patient 4 or 5 days ago, and then you go back to the same ward, and then that patient is not there.
Then Bash was called to transport a COVID positive patient.
Lift your feet up and out towards me, that's it. Did you come in? Did you? Just felt poorly, did you? I'm quite frightened to take something back. Then my wife's at home and my son's at home, and I just sort of pray that I don't take anything back.
The staff have had to be not just the porter, the nurse, the doctor. They have had to become the family.
Some patients that stick with you, and you know, especially ones where you've sort of been there at the end, and yeah, it stays with you, yeah.
How did you cope?
We speak to psychologists, which have been started the last couple of months, which really helps. I have sessions every month. Just about coping, you get a lot of anxiety with it.
What happens when you go home at night?
The things that I've learnt with a psychologist to kind of do them at night. So coping techniques. Not always, it is getting better. You know, you sometimes do come out of work and think, oh, I have achieved something today.
Marcia Brown is in charge of Castle Ward. She has been all the way through, managing staffing levels and critically their morale.
Over Christmas was hard, and they were just tired, but then you have to look out for people being too tired to then continue, because then they'll get poorly. So it's like a balance of not leaving your colleagues short where they're struggling, or running yourself into the ground. It's quite difficult. But it was okay, we're good, we're a good team, we got through it.
Now, we have been filming in an intensive care unit at Warwick Hospital, where the number of patients have dropped dramatically in the past fortnight, but those that are there are still very sick. Interestingly, one of them, Cyril Annis, told us that he had had his call for the vaccine 2 days after he fell ill with COVID, which was bad timing for him. But he and the others that we met in that ICU are receiving the very best of care from staff who have had the most exhausting and sometimes frightening year of their lives. It's 7:30 p.m. and the night shift on the intensive care unit at Warwick Hospital is being given a handover.
So Suja's in charge. Carly, if you go to 2, please, and John and Amy, if you share 4 and 5.
These are the hours between dusk and dawn, on a ward where patients can hover between life and death.
Hi! I know, it's boiling, isn't it?
There are 3 patients tonight, but that can change at a moment's notice.
Cyril? Cyril? Do you want to give your teeth a little clean now and take your tablets? Yeah, I'll go and get a bowl and stuff, okay? And we'll do that. All right, okay. I don't think anybody anticipated that it would have gone on this long at the start of the first wave. So until everybody is vaccinated, then I don't think... you just don't want to be too hopeful. You don't know how much more staff can take, if they could take another wave, or... It's been really testing, beyond anything that we could ever have imagined. And I think the only thing that everyone will come out stronger the other side, I think, is the only thing that you can probably take from it. We just like to keep it as calm and as peaceful overnight so they can get that rest and recuperation as much as they need. You have to know what's going on with them at all points. Is that Cyril? Let me just check. Cyril? You all right, Cyril? Yeah. So, yeah, you have to know what's going on with your patient at all times. All right, Gannon. How's your night going?
It's okay. You came into work and it was like some sort of like biological warfare scenario, because you just didn't know, because everyone was hyper cautious. It's like the analogy that I gave to my parents is, it's like you're flying a plane in the dark with all the instruments not working, and I have no idea whether, all I can tell you is maybe we're going up or down. I can't tell you where the destination is. And infection control protocols changed weekly. You didn't know if it was getting better, worse, or staying the same. And then how do you translate the experience that you've had here, where you have PPE that we now know works very effectively, to a situation where you go home and sit around the table with your family and have dinner?
Like kissing your husband and stuff, and that's like beyond anything that you can even imagine, like not wanting to even kiss your husband, because you think, oh God, am I going to give him COVID when I do this, or have I carried it? And it's just, yeah, horrendous, like just awful.
ICUs are intimate places.
Hello, sweet. My name's Carly. Are you comfy? Are you going to try and get some sleep?
Relationships are nurtured through the stroke of a hand to soothe the pain and the fear.
Okay, we're here. You just try and get some rest. You're not on your own. Right. You're warm enough. I feel a bit cold.
There is a routine now. There are drugs that weren't available in the first wave. They know more about how to care for these patients than they did then. But they also know these are the sickest of the COVID patients.
We are the Be Active, Be Healthy team. During last year, we have adapted virtually to keep antenatal, postnatal ladies and families active. We have positively promoted health and well-being through the different levels of lockdown. We have worked creatively and provided practical solutions to help families remain physically active and motivated by using everyday items from and around the home. Our team has shared ideas, thoughts and information on social media daily, building up virtual networks and online communities with the families of Coventry. Our team aims to help reduce the risk of obesity among children by supporting and motivating families to adopt healthy, long-term behaviours.
Some of the work that we've been doing throughout the pandemic within the dementia service.
When the COVID pandemic began in March 2020, North Warwickshire had the largest proportion of cases, and it was identified that by the DCP that cognitive impaired patients were most at risk. During this time, 30 boxes of MySense telehealth monitoring was gifted, and it was identified that this cohort of patients would benefit from telehealth monitoring to help them to live well at home, reduce hospital admission. The aim of the project was to improve the quality of support for patients and carers and reduce incidences of crisis. As a service, we have faced some significant challenges throughout the pandemic. Most of the patients we were seeing were shielding, and PPE was a barrier to communication, but we managed to put them at ease, and patients are accepting of it as it's now the new norm. The feedback from patients and family has been really positive. We conducted some surveys before MySense monitoring and during monitoring. On auditing this data, there's been a significant decrease in GP appointments, hospital admissions and urgent calls to 999 and 111. Moving forward with the service, the evidence has showed what an impact MySense monitoring has had on service users, and funding has now been secured to further continue the work we do, and we have further supplies of MySense secured.
Hello, I'm Leslie Barker, Community Clinical Practitioner working with the Enhanced Care Team. The Enhanced Care Team is made up of 2 ACPs and 5 clinical practitioners. When the pandemic hit, fewer people were attending ED and GPs had dramatically reduced their face-to-face availability. As a service, we knew that people were deteriorating in their own homes and so looked at new ways of working in order to meet their needs. We linked up with 3 local GP surgeries and offered a home visiting service for their deteriorating patients. Alongside this, we developed links with the West Midlands Ambulance Service with an offer to see patients that they had visited who they deemed not poorly enough to convey to ED, but also not well enough to leave at home without skilled clinical input. These collaborations led to the creation of the Urgent Response Team, and we could see these patients within 2 hours, assess those patients using our advanced clinical skills, implement a management plan and prescribe where needed. This enabled us to keep people in their own homes when safe to do so, relieving pressure on the acute service.
I'm Tracy Evans, one of the specialist palliative care team. As all our face-to-face teaching was put on hold due to the pandemic, the specialist palliative care team made the decision to move our training onto Microsoft Teams, and what a challenge that has been, especially for the dinosaurs amongst us. We felt that it was necessary to allow staff to gain hours for their professional development, but ultimately identifying that staff also need that time to have a little bit of time out for themselves. To date, we've actually offered 51 sessions. Of those, we've trained 178 Swift staff, and we've also trained for 49 non-Swift staff. That's including nursing homes and hospice staff.
Hello, we are the Family Nurse Team, and we cover Warwickshire, Solihull and Coventry.
We have continued to deliver our service both face-to-face and virtually throughout the COVID-19 pandemic.
Our programme enables young parents to have a healthy pregnancy, improve their child's health and development, to plan their own futures and to achieve their aspirations.
New FMP evidence from a large-scale RCT across England proves that our programme has a positive impact on children's lives by improving readiness for school and tackling health inequalities.
Our future plans include tailoring our programme and using a more personalised approach, therefore improving our outcomes even further.
At the beginning of the pandemic in 2020,
we had no idea how or what was in store for us.
Tiring, definitely, and I think every day it was something different. There was new pieces of information or guidance coming out, things were changing, and that was quite tiring in itself.
Staff felt frightened. It was a fear of the unknown at the time. Nobody knew what to really expect.
Fear, sadness, and anxiety.
From a physio point of view, I think at times it was really difficult because it didn't feel like we were doing our job. We weren't getting patients that were here for rehab. And at times I think I felt a bit lost with what I was doing.
For me, over the last 12 months, is in relation to the system beds and the adaptability and dedication to teamwork that every single branch of the Out of Hospitals Collaborative has brought to those system beds. It really was an honour to see and an honour to work with.
What a year this has been. How wonderful the teams have pulled together. They've trained a number of other staff. They've supported other teams. The fear in their eyes, holding the hands of patients that were fearful of their own life.
Throughout the pandemic, special times of the year were remembered. Patients were encouraged to get involved in activities. And birthdays were celebrated. The past year has been so hard for community hospitals, but their resilience, compassion and commitment and teamwork has got them through. I am so proud of what they've all achieved over this past year.
Thank you, Meg, for sharing that. I'm sure members of the public will agree what a fantastic summary of the phenomenal work that's gone on over the last year, and in particular the Channel 4 documentary. And all of the board of directors have every month heard patient and staff stories of a similar vein. But the Channel 4 documentary and news items really did sort of emphasise the enormous emotional and physical price that our frontline colleagues paid. And the stories about the impact on family members in particular really does bring to the forefront how fantastic our staff are. And I could not be prouder of everyone who works in Swift. It is a phenomenal organisation. Glenn, before we move on, anything you wanted to add?
No, I think you just said it there, Chairman, in terms of the sacrifice not only of staff but also family members over the last year to help us to respond. I think you also heard in that video the involvement of the organisation in trials and research that helped the NHS wider response. So huge contributions to improving the response to COVID for the NHS as well as locally.
The one other bit of our sort of family that I'd like to sort of call out, because it hasn't been mentioned so far, is our chaplaincy service. During the last 18 months of the pandemic, have done a phenomenal amount of work in providing comfort to our staff as well as to people at the end of life or in a state of heightened and understandable anxiety. So thank you everyone for your enormous efforts. But as much as we're praising the organisation in general and all of our colleagues in general, there are certain members of staff who have been really have gone the extra mile. And so it's always for me the highlight of the board meeting when we celebrate monthly winners of the Going the Extra Mile Award. But today it's the annual Going the Extra Mile Award winners celebration. So we've got three sort of celebrations. First of all, a clinical Going the Extra Mile winner, a non-clinical Going the Extra Mile winner, and then a Going the Extra Mile team winner. So if you'll bear with me, I want to celebrate those sort of three groups. So the first is our clinical winner, and hopefully we've got Leslie Williams with us on the line. Hopefully, Leslie, we're not running too early that you've not been able to join us. If you're not with us, I'm going to celebrate you anyway. So Leslie had a huge impact when she was moved to the 23-hour ward from Willoughby Ward during the COVID-19 pandemic. Leslie's nominator stated that she's dedicated to providing the very best care to her patients and has a wonderful working relationship with colleagues. She's always doing what she can to help others, including teaching students and new members of staff. Leslie increases morale within a team and always has a caring ear to listen to colleagues and patients' concerns. The person who nominated it said that they wished there were more Leslies in the world, as she is just brilliant and is a credit to the hospital and the NHS. They also thanked her for joining the 23-hour ward team and being so lovely every day. And, you know, Leslie, I'm absolutely delighted that you're winning the clinical Going the Extra Mile annual award. So either a digital or a physical round of applause for Leslie as a great example. You're an absolute hero. Thank you very, very much. We'll then move on to the non-clinical winner, Marina Cleverly. And Marina is an oncology coordinator, and she had two nominations. One commented that Marina, who's been working at Swift for 10 years, is a credit to the trust. She goes above and beyond to make the Alresford and Rigby units lovely places to work and for patients to visit. Marina also always makes it her mission to ensure staff and patients are well looked after and happy. Another nominator stated that Marina is very supportive to all staff and is a positive, approachable and understandable individual. They also noted that due to Marina's support and guidance, they have developed within their role and grown as a person. So Marina, thank you. Big round of applause for Marina as our non-clinical Going the Extra Mile Award winner. There are positive and negatives of all this digital malarkey that we have to live in. The negative, or arguably some would say the positive, is the winners don't have to have their photograph taken with Glenn and I at the annual general meeting, but our services are available for photography when social distancing allows. And the team winner is a nickel unit, and hopefully, if we're not too early, some colleagues will be with us on the line. And they won the award in the Winter 2021 award, but they've also now won the annual award for their consistent dedication to maintaining the very highest standards of care despite the pandemic, and for thinking of ways to make the days memorable and special for patients. The nomination says that due to visitor restriction, family members were unable to visit and bring in home comforts. Therefore, the team wrote to companies, local companies, to ask for donation of DVDs, CDs, personal hygiene products and treats to make a patient's stay in hospital more comfortable. They received a huge response from the community in all aspects, and the nominator provided numerous examples of the NICO unit going above and beyond to not only care for patients, but also to keep them entertained. They organised presents, birthday cakes and balloons for the patients in their care on their birthdays. At Christmas, they organised baubles, took photographs of patients, placed them inside with snowflakes and some chocolate to make it to be able to take to their families. They also helped patients make Valentine's cards for their loved ones, which in some cases were the last gift the families received from them. The team also organised arts and crafts, bingo and sing-along. The exceptional care the team provide has been noted and commented on by student nurses, bank staff that help on the ward and patient families who have written lots of thank you cards to thank the team for their care, empathy and dedication. Nicole Unit, you make me and the whole board incredibly proud. So again, a round of applause for the Nicole Unit for their being winners of the team award for the annual Going the Extra Mile award. Now, for members of the public who have younger members of the family who may be still in education, I'd just like to say, when you listen to those stories for the Going the Extra Mile winners, and when you hear the Channel 4 documentary and the video that Glenn shared with us, there is no greater career option that a young person can consider than considering a work of service to care in their community, in whatever guise that takes. And the NHS is a wonderful employer. And I would strongly encourage anyone who's in education to think of a career as a nurse, an allied health professional, maybe a doctor, or if you really want to push the boat out, a career in management in the NHS. But it is a wonderful place to work. And at the end of the day, it may have been emotionally and physically exhausting, but you will have done a phenomenal amount of good in the kindness and compassion you have shown patients and their families. So I'd really shout out to the younger members of society, come and work in the NHS. The NHS needs you, and it's a great career where you can achieve much good, as demonstrated by our Going the Extra Mile awards. So I think then we're on to questions from members of the Trust and the general public. I'll just have a look in the chat box to see if we've had any so far. We have had one from Hilary, which any staff vacancies occurring in health settings nationwide, Brexit and other causes. Is this a problem? How has Swift managed this in the year? Glenn?
Yeah, thank you, Russell. And thank you, Hilary, for the question. I suppose one of the main reasons why staffing is a challenge for the NHS is what I referred to earlier, which is the kind of continuous growth of demand for NHS services. So every year at this AGM, we're normally looking at big increases in activity in out of hospital, in outpatients, in theatres, in inpatient places. So we need a continuous growth in our workforce. And that has been a challenge over the last year. We have a responsibility to train and develop staff, as the chairman's just said, and we have some specific partnerships, particularly with Warwick Medical School to train new doctors, with Buckingham Medical School also, but also with Coventry University to train nurses and therapists and other disciplines. And so we're constantly investing in that. We've also invested in having more apprenticeship roles in all sorts of settings over the organisation over the last year. And as Russell implied, I think we've also seen, and hope we'll continue to see, a positive from COVID, which is people seeing what a great place the NHS is and wanting to be part of it. So people applying for jobs in the NHS, not just because of the wider economy, but actually because it's a great place to be. I actually trained as an accountant, joined as an apprentice accountant all those years ago. And you can do some pretty boring accountancy jobs in life, but being in the NHS made it even more exciting, obviously led me to go into a wider leadership role. So there's huge opportunities. We've had our pressure points. We discussed Some of those actually during our board meeting this week, we talked about maternity services, and we've changed the model of delivery in maternity, which requires more time from midwives. But again, we've recruited and we've got more staff joining us, so we'll be catching up with the numbers of staff we need in order to deliver those services. So we've responded well. Those statistics I showed you around the staff survey place us as one of the most popular trusts in the NHS for people to work in. So we do generally manage to attract really good people. Whenever we advertise for consultants, there's always a queue of people wanting to come here and be part of us to take those roles forward. So despite this year, actually, we've seen more people retiring over the last year, because actually in the previous year, they stayed on to help us through COVID. So we've had a double retirement effect this year. But lots of new people coming in and innovating and bringing ideas. So we remain in a good place. But the way we treat our staff is an important part of that. So retention is just as important as recruitment.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Just a comment from Heidi. I recently returned from excellent care at Warwickshire Hospital on the orthopaedic ward. However, while there, the boiler didn't work for 5 days, so nurses had to boil kettles to wash patients. 1 out of 3 monitoring machines didn't work and the computer system collapsed on the day I left. The nurses are fabulous, exhausted, and don't need this. Glenn again?
I can only agree with you. I mean, obviously we're an incredibly busy trust, and we've got a great maintenance team who respond to whatever comes their way. But obviously, like any organisation, there will be things that happen that need to be responded to. As I described, we've spent £27 million in the last year on capital, and also spend revenue in terms of maintaining our estate. We're just going through a review of our estate now to look at how we can enhance it for the future. There's parts of the Warwick Hospital site, and I'm sat in one of them right now, which go back into before 1900, because it was the old, I'm trying to think of the word now. What's the word that used to produce? I'll think of it in a moment. But anyway, No. It's workhouse. That's the word that I was struggling with. So there's bits. So there's some really old estate, which is hard to maintain. But also we've been able to invest in some new estate. So Stratford Hospital, the enhancements I referred to at Leamington Hospital, the new facilities on this site. So we're constantly expanding. We do need to appropriately spend on maintaining that estate. And I suppose what I was trying to refer to earlier in the way that we manage our finances is to ensure that we do have the resources to do those things, because in other trusts, particularly the deficit scenario has meant they've had to pull back on things like backlog maintenance for their buildings. But I hope the issues that you flagged there around orthopaedics have been resolved. We've got a fantastic general manager in there. I'll check in with her after this to make sure it's all okay. But thank you for the positive feedback about the excellent care and the staff.
I think the only thing I'd add, Glenn, and say to Heidi, is clearly that the Warwick Hospital is, as Glenn has just indicated, is not a modern hospital. But to build a modern hospital would cost an absolute fortune, and the costs of financing that would basically stop our ability to invest in other stuff. And so, it is like living in an old house, that the maintenance team do a great job, although we take on board, this specific example. But it is like an old house. It's cheaper than building a brand new place, so to speak. But it does have its challenges, and we're aware of that. But thank you, Heidi. Any other questions from members of the public if they want to raise a digital hand or put something in the chat? Okay, I can't see any digital hands going up. Normally, as soon as I say that, 3 digital hands go up, and none have. So I think that therefore brings the meeting to a close, apart from a few comments from me. It has been the most extraordinary time for society to have lived through this COVID pandemic. Every family has been touched by it, but in particular, those who have lost loved ones. My heart goes out to those who have lost loved ones during the pandemic, but my heart also goes out to those members of staff, as we saw in our Channel 4 documentary, who have done an absolutely phenomenal job. And we are and will be eternally grateful to them. I also want to thank, though, as I said earlier, Glenn and the executive directors for their leadership, the non-executive directors for the work they've done, and the agility the whole board has demonstrated in finding different ways of working through the pandemic, which allowed us to still make the progress that Glenn talked about in his presentation. And again, I'd just like to thank the Council of Governors for the work they do. We have other groups within the family of Swift. The Patient Forum is a phenomenal source of good. The work they have been doing in reaching out to patients who have been with us during the pandemic has been outstanding. And to all of the volunteers, as I mentioned earlier, thank you for the time you've given to trying to help other members of society. I'm very optimistic about the future of Swift. As Glenn indicated, it is about the relentless pursuit of excellence. We're not perfect, but we are aiming to be better. And it is about us working to the long term and the challenges that we have to maintain a healthy population. Our strategy of helping you to help yourself, but there for you when you need us, is absolutely the right strategy going forward. And the work that Glenn and others have done to put that into a broader family of the Foundation Group, identifying and sharing best practice at pace with other parts of the NHS, allows us to accelerate forward our improvement programme. And we do have such great partners in people like SCC over in the Digital Hub, Warwick Medical School, and other system partners to help us achieve our full potential. So I look forward to seeing many of you at our next board meeting. Members of the public are always able to join us in our digital board meetings. Details are on the website. And if I don't see you at one of those, I look forward to seeing you either at a Council of Governors meeting or at our next annual general meeting. Thank you all very much for your time, and take care and stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.